Welcome back to the Oxendine Law Podcast. I'm Jared, and you are
Christine Balmer.
And we're back with our first bonus episode. Boom! How about a bonus? And the bonus is going to be, drum roll. That's okay. Drum roll. Let me do it. Biggest mistakes people make during divorce and how to avoid them. Obviously, there are certain things you can do better or not do at all that would impact division of your assets and custody and your financial future and just your overall well-being. So let's talk about how we can avoid you stepping into those booby traps. Mistake number one, Christine.
Getting married?
Big one. Getting married. Don't ever get married. Don't get married in the first place, and you don't have to deal with this.
There is one way I can ensure you prevent divorce. Don't you? Kidding, of course.
Get married.
Kidding, of course.
So that's the next episode. We could talk about that for maybe 2 podcasts worth, right? So maybe we'll do that, guys. Maybe we'll circle back with a podcast episode on the pros and cons of getting married versus not getting married.
Imagine advice from a divorce attorney who not to marry. There you go. There's a good episode.
And who not to marry and things you should do before you get married. See? Golly, should we pivot now? No, we're going to make y'all wait. All right. Mistake number 1, letting your emotions control your decisions.
Definitely the biggest mistake that people make, 100%. And it goes 2 ways. It's either you're so emotional that you insist on something, like the emotional attachment to the house. How often do we see that? No, but this is where my babies were born and they've grown up here. And I can't let go of the house. And then what happens is the other spouse moves out. They get a nice new place. You're in a house that's kind of falling apart. You can't really afford. You've never maintained this household as a single income. And you're overwhelmed. And why? Because you just couldn't let go emotionally of that house. So that's kind of like one side of it. The other side of it is that you are just so emotionally spent that you're like, I just want out. I had a client, one of my favorite clients I've ever had. It's been many, many years now. And she walked in the front door and she said, I want my daughter in my Jeep. And that's all I want. Draw it up right now. Write it up. I want my daughter. I want my Jeep, and I'm out. She was entitled to a lot. And she said, I don't care. I want to give it up. I want to give it up. And I talked her out of it multiple times. But yeah, that was an emotional decision. And she still thanks me to this day. I still get an email from her each year on the anniversary of her divorce date where she once again thanks me for not being the attorney who let her make that emotional decision.
I'm glad she listened to you. And I'm going to take this from a slightly different angle. We've talked about kind of just wanting to be done. We've talked about being emotionally attached to an asset. How many times have you seen people make decisions out of anger or resentment or even worse, guilt? Mm-hmm. They give up on stuff because they feel guilty for what they should have done or what they did do, when frankly, honestly, your guilt probably is not, in the eyes of the law, any type of legal guilt that's going to cause you to give up or do what you're about to do or not to do. So the best thing we can tell you on how to avoid this mistake is take the emotions completely out of it, listen to the legal advice that you're getting, and make business decisions. Because I hate to say it and I hate to be cold, but let's call it what it is. This is a business transaction.
It is.
It is not an emotional transaction anymore. You and your spouse are getting divorced. We're not making emotional decisions together.
Right.
We're not making emotional decisions at all.
Well, to me,
we're making decisions based on what's best for you,
sure,
what's best for your kids, and we're doing it from a rational mindset, a business approach.
Yeah, the emotional part is whether to be divorced or not. Once you have gotten to the point where it's, yes, we're at divorce, emotions stop. Yes, you're going to still feel the emotions, but if you're still dealing in emotions, that's where you're deciding, are we going to be divorced or are we not going to be divorced? Those are the decisions emotions should control, because you should not make that decision based on finances. Whether you want to stay together or not should be the emotional decision. Once that's made, that's why you get the attorney. That's why we step in at that point. We are able to take the emotions out. Like, I can be your mouthpiece. I can say what you want to say without saying it with emotion. So take your attorney's advice, get the emotions out of it when you're making the business decisions related to a divorce.
That's it. All right. Mistake number 2, not understanding the finances. Huge mistake. There's an obvious answer why, right? If you don't understand the finances, you're potentially leaving a lot of money on the table. You're leaving yourself exposed. You're leaving yourself vulnerable. And how does this actually come to play in practice? Number 1, sometimes people, they just don't want to deal with it.
Yeah.
Like I said, I mean, they just want to be done. They don't care. They just want out. They don't want the confrontation. They're willing to take it in the cheeks
Mhm.
just to put it behind them. And then they turn around and regret that very soon thereafter, because now their spouse, you've done your spouse a huge favor. They're financially secure. They're hop, skipping, and jumping, telling all their friends and buddies how great they did and how much they took advantage of you. And at some point, you start to feel like a sucker. Now, I'll tell you where I see this come to play more often than not. And I can't stand it when people feel this way. And I do my best to empower them and get them to think differently. And most of the time, I'm successful. But they're dealing with a controller.
Yeah.
And they're dealing with a spouse that is a micromanager on the finances. And they've controlled the finances. They control the bank accounts, the investments. Frankly, their spouse has no idea what they have. But they've got a spouse that is chirping in their ear saying, look, I've told you to trust me. Here's everything. I've laid it out to you very clear. Don't listen to your attorney. Don't have them send me requests for documents.
Yeah.
Trust me, because if you don't listen to me, if you listen to your attorney, this is what's going to happen.
Mhm.
You're going to get much less than what I'm willing to offer you.
Right. They're
And
just trying
people
to
are
get your money.
intimidated by that.
They're financially invested.
Yes.
I'm trying to do you a favor.
Yes.
They're just trying to take your money. Why don't we just split what's here instead of paying that guy to tell us how to split what's here?
Right. And
Yeah,
you
you're
should be
hearing
run.
Right.
That is the wolf in sheep's clothing. Why? I mean, this should be screaming at you. And it's hard to see it when you're in the situation.
Yeah.
But to everybody else, it's screaming. Why are they telling me this? Because they know the only way they get what they want is if they can dupe you into it.
Yep.
Because if you let your attorney do your job, and if you let this play out the way it's supposed to play out, they'll have to pay you a lot more money than what they want to pay you.
Yep.
So understand the finances and don't let somebody pressure you into a financial settlement.
Yeah, but also understand your finances going forward. Kind of like the example I gave before, we see a lot of people sort of bite off more than they can chew post-divorce because they don't understand their own finances. They don't understand that, let's say you're not going to be the primary parent and you've said, okay, well, I can probably afford to keep the house and I'll keep paying for the kids' health insurance. And yeah, I can take on the car payment. So give her the one that's paid off. I'll take it. And you forget you're paying child support, or you've committed to these things not knowing how much child support's going to be. So you've found yourself in a situation where you don't have the finances to do what you want. I mean, you're trying to be right by your spouse and your kids and say, well, don't worry, I'll take this on and I'll take on that debt and it's a noble thing to do. But if you don't understand your finances, then you've just set yourself up for failure. And that's ultimately still going to trickle down to that family member and to your kids. So on both sides, like, understand your finances as what you can afford and what you will be able to do. Don't go buy a new house that you ultimately can't afford. Understand what life is going to look like financially post-divorce.
All right. Common mistake number 3, dragging your case out too long. In other words, what do I mean by that? You got to know a good deal when it's on the table. When the snake comes up and bites you on the leg, you need to feel that bite. I mean, people screw themselves by just dragging their case out. They want more, more, more. They think there's more stuff that's hidden. They got 2 burdens in hand, right? But they're looking for that third bird that may not even exist. And
Right.
the best example I can give on this, and this was unfortunately my client didn't take my advice. I hate to let's be honest.
What?
Right?
We have a
Client didn't
client that-
take my advice. At least I gave them the right advice. They didn't take it. This was a business. This was around COVID, and this business was doing amazingly well before COVID. And I hate the COVID thing. I don't use it as excuses, but it did impact a lot of businesses.
Yeah, positively and negatively.
And we had a settlement offer on the table that was amazing. It got our client more than half the assets, a nice monthly payment, but she wanted more. And we knew, our expert even said, I've got concerns about the longevity of this business going forward. In other words, you need to take this deal because if you continue, this business is going to have less and less revenue, less and less sales. There's going to be less money to divide, and there's not going to be enough money to go around to pay you what's currently on the table. So against my advice and against our experts' advice, this client, they wanted their pound of flesh, and they wanted to dig, and they wanted to push. And guess what happened? As predicted, the business had a steep decline in sales and was almost immediately right after. I mean, we couldn't have called this better. Sales went way down, revenue went way down, employees started getting fired. less money was coming to the bank account. And not only was less money coming to the bank account, the business owner husband was having to actually spend some of the money he had in the bank account just to keep the business afloat.
Right.
So at the end of the day, we settled the case shortly thereafter. Client still did fine, but they would have done much better had they taken the initial deal. And then it would have been their spouse's problem to deal with the fallout of the business.
Right. Right. I think probably the phrase that I hate the most coming from a client is, but I just want my day in court, because that's doing everyone a disservice. Because I don't know what you've seen on TV or what you think court's going to be like, but there is a person sitting up there in a robe who really could not care less about you. They see you as client A and client B, plaintiff, defendant. They don't care about you. They're not listening to what he or she did to hurt your feelings or any of that. And there's not some big audience. This isn't televised. I want my day in court does nothing for anyone. That judge does not care. The judge is filtering out all of that factual information to get to the point of how many children are there? What are their ages? How much do you make? How much do you make? Okay, here's child support. Who owns the house? How much is left in the equity? Okay, this is how we're dividing it. That your day in court, the judge is not going to sit there. This isn't Judge Judy, and go, you, sir, I cannot believe this, that you're an embarrassment to husbands everywhere. How dare you? This woman deserves everything. Like, this is not going to happen. You're not going to get that satisfaction. And so when we tell you that, no, you don't want your day in court, it's probably going to be the least satisfying thing that you've ever done. If you've built it up to, oh, I can't wait to get on that stand, to stand there in front of God and everybody and say how I feel and what he or she did to me. And it's crickets out there. Nobody cares. Okay. All right, Crowell, did you need a tissue? All right. So back to how much is their house worth? How much is left on the mortgage? We're going right back to the factual information. So I want my day in court doesn't serve anybody except, I guess, maybe me and you. We get to go have a little fun.
Well, we love trying cases, but, we try to give you the best advice, not based on what's best for us,
Right.
but what's best for you. And then it's up to you whether or not you take it, which frankly, ironically, ties into our last common mistake, which is ignoring legal advice.
Yeah.
Trust the professionals that you've hired to handle your case. You're paying us for a reason. We want to get you the best result possible. I mean, our reputation is on the line.
Yeah.
Whether or not we get a good referral is on the line. I mean, we are trying to give you the best possible advice so that you walk away as happy as possible. Why would you ignore that advice? And it could be from anything advice concerning when to settle, things not to do, such as not posting things on social media. It could be inappropriate things to say. I mean, there's a million different things we're going to give you advice on, but take your lawyer's advice. We are your advocate. We have your best interest in mind. It is a huge mistake to ignore legal advice. And there may be areas where it's the client's judgment call.
Sure.
And we'll tell you, hey, here's your options. You could go either way. We're fully fine with you making the decision.
Right.
But if you have an attorney that's adamant that you need to do something or not do something, you're really doing yourself a disservice by not taking that advice.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't know how many people know this, but as attorneys, you can fire a client. And if I have a client that is acting adversely to my advice, I 100% will withdraw, because I'm not going to be able to stand in front of a judge one day and explain why my client did what they did, because you're also a reflection of me. Just like I'm working for you, my client's a reflection of me. So if I'm adamant about something and you're absolutely in refusal to follow my advice, then I no longer can adequately represent you. So remember that those little pushbacks are one thing, but if you're absolutely doing the opposite of what I've told you to do, you do risk losing my representation.
Avoiding these mistakes, folks, can help you move forward with your divorce case in the best possible way. Again, if you have questions, send those in to us. We love to answer your questions. We'd love to have you in for a free consultation. So just reach out to us. We're always happy to help. And be sure to subscribe. If you're on YouTube by chance, hit that subscribe button, and that way you won't miss any future podcast episodes. Thanks for hanging with us. We will see you next week.